I'm really excited today to get to show you this sleek bracelet that I created, that I designed. It's a very soft, supple bracelet that you can see that it just kind of folds down into nothingness, so it's very lightweight to wear, and it just feels so good. Everybody, when they wear it, they tend to pet it, which is kind of fun. So this is going to be using our square stitch, and then we're also going to create a little peyote tube toggle for the closure on this, and let's get going on that, shall we? I want to give you guys a couple of tips on needle threading because I know that that can always be an issue for people. If you're using Fireline, which is what I recommend to do my bead weaving with, you have to kind of blunt the tip to get it to go through the end of your needle. Fireline has a bit of a rounded profile to it, so you can just take your fingernail and rub it on the end there, and at that point you will be able to better thread your needle. The other thing that you want to do when you're threading your needle is make sure that you have just a very small bit of thread showing there. The smaller that tip is, the better off you're going to be. And then the last tip that I have for you is think of yourself as taking the needle to the thread instead of the thread to the needle. And for some reason, that motion makes it a little bit easier and faster to thread your needle. So once you have your needle threaded, and we're going to start working on the square stitch base. Here I've already started out the base. I'm using slightly bigger beads than you would in the project pattern, so you'll want to refer to the pattern for the exact size beads that you need. Here I need to use larger beads so that you can see them on the video camera. But I've created a base here of square stitch. You'll want to refer to my previous tutorials, the flat square stitch technique tutorial, for instructions on how to do flat square stitch, and that will get you going. I'm started out already here, and on the next row when I do my square stitch, I'm going to be adding in both an accent color bead and a bugle bead. To start out, we're going to do the very first stitch with just a single outline color is what I tend to call this, the outline color. And just like normal, you'll go back through that bead that you just added. Now on the next segment that I'm going to add here, I'm going to add a bugle bead. And the bugle bead is going to take up the space of several beads on the previous row. So we'll only do one bugle bead, in this case for 3 beads on the previous row. Because these are larger beads, you'll want to refer to your instructions for the project that you're making to make sure that you're using the same bugle bead to previous beads ratio. So you'll pick up 1 bugle bead and then also 1 outline color bead. We're skipping, in this case, 3 beads for that bugle bead, and then you're going to stitch through the 4th free bead there, and we'll stitch just the outline color in. So now that's jumped into alignment perfectly there, and we'll pass through just the outline color bead. We need to create the center accent color section. So at this point, the accent colors are not stitched in. They actually just sit loose. It's one of the things that makes this project very supple. So in this case, I'm just going to pick 6 of these accent colors. Those are not stitched in, so that means that I need to pick up 1 outline color also. We'll skip the 6 on the base and then stitch into the 7th where that outline color will get stitched in. And you're only stitching in that outline color. So now these are all loose and not connected, and the bugle bead is loose. Now we're at our very last section that we're going to do here. We're picking up a bugle bead and our last outline bead. We can stitch in just that outline bead. Voila. And then just like you do with any other normal square stitch, you'll have to go back and reinforce those 2 rows. Now because in this particular case I'm using the larger beads, I may have to do it in more than one pass. I don't think I can get my needle all the way across reliably, so it's totally fine if you can only get it through some of the beads at a time. And that's what I'm doing here. We'll catch those last 4. And then now we'll go back through the row that we just added to reinforce that. Flip our piece, and we're going to do the exact same thing again. The way we create this, we're going to be creating increases as we go along, but what you'll do is you're going to have 3 rows where you're going to have the 6 accent colors in the center there. So once you get to the 3-row point with these, then I'm going to come back and we're going to show you how you're going to do the increases. Now that you've got this all figured out about adding the accent beads and the bugle beads, I'm going to throw a little curveball at you. We're going to start adding additional accent beads in each set of 3 rows as we go along. It's going to create this nice soft V effect, increasing outward, and gives a really sculpted look to the bracelet. So let's take a look at the beads. Here I have gone ahead and finished up my 3 rows where I added just the 6 beads of the accent color in the center. When I go to do the next row, everything is going to be the same. We're going to start out with that outside color bead. We're going to do our bugle bead. Hello, Mr. Bugle. And an outside color bead. And then this time, when I pick up the beads for the accent section, I'm going to pick up 7 beads instead of 6. And then I still pick up just the single outline color here as I do the stitch. And pass through that outline color. Now you're noticing that it's kind of bowing out because it's obvious there's a whole extra bead in there like that. What you can do to kind of help adjust this as you go along is I do a little wiggle. You got to give it a little wiggle, and I'm kind of pulling outward, giving it a little more room as it goes along. This will suck up as we add more rows, so don't worry about it too much, but periodically that's my making room kind of motion, is just giving it the little wiggle with a little outward pull. Then we will go ahead and finish this row with a bugle bead and an outline color bead. And then you would just go back and do your reinforcing of these 2 rows. So from here on out, what you're going to do is you'll do another 2 rows with 7 beads of accent color. Then you'll do 3 rows with 8 beads of accent color, and you'll continue adding 1 extra accent color bead for each 3 rows until you get to the number that is referenced in your pattern. And that will give you something that looks like this. And once you get to the point where you have gotten to that maximum number at the center point, then come back to me and we will talk about sizing, because sizing will be important in the next step. It's important for us to talk about sizing with this bracelet because you're going to make the adjustments to your sizing in the middle section of it. So you kind of need to know what's going on with that. If you don't already know what your bracelet size is, many people do already, but if you don't, here's how you would figure that out. You take a tape measure and you place it around your wrist and come up with that number. In my particular case, come on here, Buster. In my particular case, that works out to about 7 inches. So that once you get that 7-inch mark, then you will need to add some for ease, and that means how you like that bracelet to fit on your wrist. I like my bracelets to be a little on the loose side, so I usually add about 1 inch to my wrist measurement. So that means that I generally wear an 8-inch bracelet. If you like to wear your bracelets a little closer, some people like them a little more snug, you might only want to add a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch to your actual wrist measurement to get your bracelet measurement. So you want to write that down, what your bracelet measurement is, and then let me show you what's going on with how this bracelet is constructed. I've broken a bracelet down into 3 different portions here, just so that you can see how it's all going to come together. What you've already done is this portion of the increase, and then we're going to create a section across the center where we use the same number of beads along that center so that it's flat and straight. And then we're going to do a decrease section where we decrease the same way we increased over here, and then we'll add the clasp on either end. So what that means is that these 2 pieces are always going to be the same length, and it's going to be a defined length because it's based on how many rows you've done, and I know that because I wrote that into the pattern. In your case, in the pattern for the sleek bracelet, these will be 2 1/4 inches each. So 2 1/4 inch here, 2 1/4 inch here. Your clasp will add about 1 inch to the length of the bracelet. So when you take all of that into account, 5 1/2 inches of your bracelet is already accounted for. That means this center section needs to be whatever the remainder is. So in my case, since I use an 8-inch bracelet, I would take 8 inches, subtract the 5.5 inches of my 2 sides and my clasp, and that means 2 1/2 inches is what this center section should measure. Now, of course, you're not going to make it in 3 pieces like this, although you could, but that's not how we're going to make it. You'll make the increase section, then you will continue with that same number of delicas as that last row in your increase section and do the center portion that we just calculated for that many rows, at which point we'll start doing the decreases, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next segment, is how to do those decreases. Once you get to the decrease section, you're going to find it super easy. You're going to just be doing the identical thing that you did on the increase section, but this time you're subtracting 1 of those accent beads every time you finish 3 rows. And you will do that all the way down until you have finished the 3 rows with 6 accent beads in the center. And that's where I am on this piece here. I have decreased down until I have done the last 3 rows with 6 accent beads in the center here. I also want to point out to you that these rows, there may be a little bit of wonkiness in how they're laying. Some people actually, and that's fine to have some of that wonkiness, but some people find that they're better at the increase section or at the decrease section, and they prefer to do only increases or decreases, and that's no problem, because what you can actually do is create 2 standalone increase sections or 2 standalone decrease sections, and then join them together with that center section like I showed you before when we were talking about the measuring. So that's an option for you if you would prefer to make it in sections and then bead those sections together. But here is where I've done it all in one piece, and I have now finished my last decrease section. We have to create the 2 rows of the outline color only on this other end so that it will mirror the first end. And to do that, the first row of this 2-row outline color only section is a little bit different, because you're going to pick up your first color like normal, your first bead. Now, we can't bead 3 individual beads to this one bugle bead because there's no place for that thread to go. So what we'll have to do is bead the 3 beads in as a section. So I'm picking up 3 beads and then I'll pass through that bugle bead. Hello. There we go. And then pass through the 3 beads that I just added as a unit. And I bet you I could see this a whole lot better if I put my little reading glasses on. Oh, now they're all in focus. Okay, so then here we have a single bead. We're able to go ahead and stitch that single bead in, and that's that outline color. And then once you get to this accent color, the section, you have a choice. You can either stitch each one of these outline colors to these accent colors, but what I prefer to do on this particular segment is just go ahead and pick up your 6 outline colors. It's 4, 5, and 6. And then I'm going to pick up one more like I would if I had just picked up accent colors. So we'll only attach this outside edge one. Like so. And then back through that. Here we're at a bugle bead again, so we'll pick up 3 to match the bugle bead plus a single for the outside bead. So we're picking up 4 total. And we'll just stitch that outside bead in. Still do your reinforcing of the 2 rows like you normally would. And if you're really lucky, you get to get it all in one fell swoop with one needle pass. I'm looking on the back side to make sure that I don't have any thread showing as I do that. And then we'll pass through the new row that I just added. Okay, then for the very last row on this one, we're just going to go ahead and attach this last row 1 bead at a time, like you did at the very start with your square stitch. And you'll keep going and complete that row. Once you finish that, we're going to come back one more time and we're going to talk about your clasp. You are so close to a finished bracelet at this point. All we have to worry about is the clasp. And the way I do a clasp on this particular bracelet is I like to use a beaded closure. I think that it creates kind of a seam-lined effect, you know, when it's all the same colors and the same beads and you don't notice the clasp nearly as much. And I use a peyote tube toggle on this. You're going to want to refer to the peyote tube toggle technique tutorial that I have posted previously if you don't already know how to make one of those. But let's talk about how you're actually going to attach it to the bracelet. Here I have created basically what I'm calling a Barbie bracelet. This is a slightly smaller scaled version. You can see that this isn't going to fit anybody except Barbie. But it has all the different pieces and parts in it. We've got the increase, we've got the center section, and then we've got the decrease. Finished off those last 2 rows there. I've already got a peyote tube toggle. This one is made out of slightly larger beads than the sample is, but everything that I'm going to show you is the same exact technique, so there's really no reason to worry about that. When you finished off by reinforcing those last 2 rows, it has you coming out the end bead here. And what we want to do is be coming out one of these more center beads to attach our toggle bar. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to jog over there. I'm going to go through a couple of beads here on the previous row. As one of the things about square stitch is that it's because you're reinforcing all those rows, you end up adding a lot of thread through the center of these beads, and the beads can get kind of clogged up with thread. If necessary, you can use a flat nose pliers to pull your needle through the beads if it starts getting super tight there and you start having issues. In this case, because I'm demonstrating on larger than normal beads, I'm actually being able to get through there quite easily. But generally, you're going to start seeing some problems with getting your needle and thread through these outside edge beads. Once you get to the proper location, you'll want to refer to the directions in your tutorial for the exact location. This sample is not exactly just the same size that what you'll make of the sample that you'll make from the tutorial. But once you get to that spot on that first row, you're going to pick up 4 more of your outline color beads. I like to make the clasp all the same color, again, because I just think that you don't notice it nearly as much. But you know what? That's a design decision. And if you wanted to use your accent color beads for your closure, that's no problem either. This is just a simple design element. So I picked up 4 beads there. Then what you're going to do is you're going to get your toggle bar and you're going to eyeball it, and you're going to find 2 beads on the diagonal that are centered in your toggle bar. And generally, I'm able to just eyeball it and kind of see where that is. If you are having trouble getting your needle through 2 beads here on the diagonal, you can actually just kind of twirl it, find the next 2 beads on the diagonal there in the center. I will sometimes go through and find which one my needle and thread goes through the easiest, because I'm going to want to be able to come back through here and reinforce this clasp area again. So I want to make sure that I can get that through nice and easy. After I've attached that bar, we're going to pick up another 4 of your outline color beads, and then you're going to bring it right back in to that first row on your bracelet. So I came out on one side and I'm going back in on the other side so that this will be centered on your bracelet end. And that's what it looks like when you bring it all, when you tighten up everything up. Your clasp is an area that gets a lot of wear and tear on any bracelet, and most of the times when you have a failure of your thread, it tends to be in the clasp area because it just gets knocked around the most, which is why I recommend that you follow this thread path and reinforce it at least 2 more times. My rule of thumb is I want 3 passes of thread through any closure area. So to reinforce, you're simply going to pass through all those beads again and just not add anything new except that thread. So up through the 4, through the 2 on the diagonal in the toggle bar, down the 4 over here, across the center to get back to the other side. Hello. Voila. Make sure you're not catching your thread on anything. And then you'll do that 1 more time, and then you're able to finish off this thread. On the other side, you're going to have to create the loop. So here I always add my toggle bar first because you're going to have to measure the loop to make sure that it will go over your toggle bar. In this case, of course, I've got the Gigantosaurus toggle bar. But on the other end, and here on this piece I've already got a thread attached, so I'm going to use that and just pretend. On your toggle bar end, you're again going to pick up 4. You're coming out in the same place on that last row. You're picking up 4 of your outline color beads, and then you're going to pick up enough beads for the loop. And in your pattern, I tell you how many beads is as a guesstimate, and the reason I say that that's a guesstimate is because not all beads are created equal. Even if they're the same size beads, you tend to have those ones that are a little bit skinnier, a little bit fatter, you know how that goes. And so it can affect the sizing of your loop. So I'm going to show you how you're going to test the sizing of your loop. In this case, I don't really know how many I need, so I'm just going to kind of pick up what I know is going to be probably too few, but I'll show you what how I'm going to know that in a second. You're going to go back to that fourth bead from the beginning, and you're going to pass through it again in the opposite direction, so back towards the bracelet. And if you need to, you can separate it all out. There we go. Which, once you've come back through, that gives you an approximation of what your final loop is going to be. And this is the point at which you can take your toggle bar and make sure that it goes through nicely. And like I said, because this is Gigantosaurus, it's not going to, but in your pattern, I give you the exact number that I used. Your mileage may vary. Your beads may need an extra 1 or 2 beads, or you may find that it's a little too loose and you may have to take off 1 or 2 beads. So that number that I give you in your pattern is just for a starting place. Once you have assured yourself that this loop is the right size, then we're going to go ahead and finish off that other leg. So now I'm going to pick up just 3 beads for this leg. We'll pass through the adjacent spot on the opposite side. And now we've got that little V shape going on. And just like I did with the toggle bar section, I suggest that you reinforce this whole pathway at least 2 more times and then end off your thread. At which point you will have your finished bracelet. And that it will include your toggle closure, which will fit perfectly like so. Okay, now here's the thing. What if you get the bracelet all made, you've finished your clasp, you go to try it on, and oh no, it's a couple of rows too small, or it's a couple of rows too big. Here's one of the things that I really love about square stitch. We are going to be able to adjust that sizing after the bracelet is completely made very easily. And this is an unusual thing. Most stitches you can't do this. But we're just going to pretend that the loop end is on here. And what I'm going to do is, say this is a little bit too big and I want to remove a couple of rows. I'm going to make sure that I'm in that center section, you know, the section where we just kept the same number as we went along when we were doing our sizing, and I can literally just cut this bracelet apart and it will not fall apart. And this is the part of the demonstration where pretty much everybody falls over and gasps when I cut this thing apart. But look, I'm tugging on this. It's not coming apart at all. The reason it's not coming apart at all, there's a couple of little threads to pull out, extra threads that are kind of tucking out, but other than that, it's not coming apart. And the reason you can do this is because we reinforced from both sides on square stitch. So that's one of the benefits of square stitch. Once I've cut the bracelet into pieces, you can go ahead and remove or add whatever you need to get your sizing correct. So if this bracelet had been too small, what I could do is add several rows at this point, just the way we did previously, and then we would join the 2 pieces together. If what you need is to remove rows because your bracelet was a little bit too big, what you can do is simply cut out however many rows you need to remove. Get rid of any of those extra little threads going on that are kind of poking out. And then here is how you're going to put these pieces back together. It's really very simple because it's exactly what you've been doing. The only difference is when you pick up a new bead, it's one that's already attached to another segment. So here I've got my thread coming out of the first section, is what I'm trying to say. And I pass through that outside color bead on the other segment. We're going to go through the outside color bead on the first side. Then when I go to pick up the next set of beads, I'm going to work my way to that next outline color. And we will stitch it to this outline color on the first side. Notice that I switched from segment to side so that I can actually say it without sounding like I'm saying naughty words. Okay, and then we'll stitch through this one, then through all the accent beads in the middle, along the middle here. And they don't want to be all straight for me, so I'll just do it in two stitches here. And then go catch the rest. Come out the very next outline color. We're going to stitch it to that corresponding outline color on the first side. Then work your way to that very last outside color, stitch it to the outside color on the other side. Voila. And then once you've reinforced those 2 rows like you normally would with a square stitch, you'll never be able to tell that there was any division between these 2 pieces. That's where you can also get away with creating 2 increased sections or 2 decreased sections and stitching them together with the middle. And that comes to the end of our bracelet. Now, this pattern is done as a soft increase and decrease, but there's no reason you can't play with that. There is also instruction in the pattern for how to create this bracelet, which is where I just did a single length all the way along and didn't do any increases and decreases. You can make an increase and decrease more dramatic if you want to. You can take some out if you're a more petite person and you don't want it to be quite as wide. It's completely up to you. Those are all design decisions that you can make. I hope you enjoy making your bracelet, and I would love it if you share what you create with me as you finish it up and wear it in good health. Thank you.